like to turn it over very briefly to the Crater PDC to give us a welcome.
And so this is Jay Rufa. I'm the Director of Planning and GIS here at Crater PDC. And in the conference room with me, I have Thaddeus Huff, who is our Economic Development Director, and then Ron Savlowski, who is our Transportation Director and head of the Tri-Cities MPO. We'd like to welcome everyone here to this RAFT workshop. I know that some people in the cities have already been doing some scorecards and working with the RAFT team, but just wanted to let you know that this is the fifth iteration of the RAFT workshop with localities throughout the coastal zone in Virginia. Crater PDC, along with Plan RVA, and Sarah Stewart's online here, wanted to get the RAFT moved inland a little bit. So this is the first kind of furthest west we've been on this workshop. So RAFT may not be the ride and RAFT may not be what we think about here, but the resilience and adaptation is a hot topic. And I know our localities, Hopewell and Petersburg, they have a lot of resilience work that needs to be done. And as we work through this workshop, I want everybody just to kind of think about how we can pool our resources to make our communities more resilient. And that's more resilient in transportation, more resilient in economic development, more resilient in environmental matters, more resilient in our day-to-day activities, more resilient in our health and education. So resilience kind of spans all of that, and us here at the PDC like to kind of keep it a broader topic and not just focused on resilience of one topic. I think we'll break out into smaller resilience topics as we go along and have workshops throughout. But I'm going to leave that to the team that leads us here, and they're professionals in this. And thank you all for coming this way, and thank you for putting in the work so far, and thank you for the work to come to help our localities. And thank you for our localities that are participating in this program.
Thank you so much, Jay. There we go. So thank you all and welcome. Let's go ahead and get into it and launch right into our goals for what we're looking for at the end of the day today. I like to be goal driven, so by 4 o'clock, we are really focusing on, Libby, if you could advance the slide, please. We are focusing on getting toward 4 major goals accomplished. The first will be to either refresh, for those of you who have been involved in the resilience adaptation feasibility tool so far, your knowledge and understanding of how the process works. And for those of you who are joining our group for the first time, we'll give you a quick orientation to how the process works. After doing that, that orientation, we will have, here we go, a brief share out of the scorecard results that have been done so far. So far, our teams have been working on the scorecards for both Hopewell and Petersburg, and then we will have a chance to talk about those a little bit very briefly. From there, that's all of the information that you have coming from us to sit through. Then it's your turn. You will be put into breakout groups where those of you from Hopewell and Petersburg will begin looking at some of your opportunities from that RAFT process that have been identified to develop your 1-year action checklist. You'll also try to identify people who can be helpful for implementation, hopefully signing yourself up for a lot of this work, and if not, identifying those who we need to make sure that we have at the table. For those of you who are with the Plan RVA localities, in your breakout group, you'll receive an orientation to the PREP tool. And so the PREP tool, and I'm horrible with acronyms, I have to flip over every time and find it, is the Planning for Resilience Evaluation and Prioritization tool. And so the Plan RVA localities, even at the same time that Hopewell and Petersburg are going through this, will be going through this in a little bit of a different way, a little bit more size to what they need right now. To be able to make some progress over the next year. So with that, I would like to do the overview of the agenda. We are pretty much right on time. So we are next going to move to Elizabeth Andrews, giving us an overview of the RAFT and some flash presentations about the opportunities. We'll come back and talk about how to develop these resilience action checklists. And then from there, move on into the breakout groups, either those resilience action checklist breakout groups or the prep tool group for the Plan RVA localities. You'll have a little bit more than an hour and 15 minutes to work, and we'll all come back together at about 3:20 to share some of those locality priority actions. We'll look for commonalities, we'll look for, have an opportunity to talk about any challenges, any kind of opportunities that you see to work together as we are all together in this single workshop. And then from there at about 3:45, you'll get a preview of what it looks like going out from here. What does the next year of this implementation look like? Finally, as we close out, we would like you to evaluate this workshop. Jay said that this is the 5th time going through. We look at those evaluations and make sure that we change things, make sure that we are adjusting the process as needed to make it work for you over the next year, and then adjusting the process as we need for the next round of communities who come in next year. And then we'll close out at about 4 o'clock. So with that, I will turn it over to Elizabeth Andrews from VCPC at William and Mary. Yes, and the note in the chat, this event is only being recorded in the main room. So some segments of the Zoom recording will be used to create videos highlighting resilience and planning efforts in Hopewell and Petersburg, but the breakout groups will not be recorded. So we will be taking notes, but if you're participating in those and you're the type of person like me who needs to have notes for yourself, you may also want to take those for yourself as well, because you will not have, nobody will have recordings from the breakout group sessions. All right, take it away, Elizabeth.
Great, thank you, Jess. So I'm happy to give you the RAFT overview, and I would first like to encourage you, there is a background video on the RAFT that will give you more information. And I think that Maddie's going to be posting the link to that video in the chat box. So I would encourage you to go watch that. But the RAFT, of course, is an acronym, the Resilience Adaptation Feasibility Tool. We can't say it often enough because it's a complicated name. But it's important to note that our goal is to help Virginia's coastal localities improve resilience to flooding and other coastal storm hazards while remaining economically and socially viable. And that's really important in this process. We recognize that that is a key component that has to be addressed. So next slide, Libby, please. Thank you. The RAFT team is actually a multidisciplinary academic partnership among multiple universities that often astonishes people. The core team has been working together since 2017. Old Dominion University, now with the Institute for Coastal Adaptation and Resilience there, William Mary Law School, the Virginia Coastal Policy Center, and the University of Virginia Institute for Engagement and Negotiation. And this university collaboration is also now supported by partnerships with Virginia State University and Virginia Tech for the implementation phase, as was noted earlier. So we're excited about that. So the process is a 3-step one. First, we do the scorecard. Students at William and Mary Law School do the scoring under our supervision, but also in partnership with locality staff. It's really important to us that we work with the staff as we do the scoring, number one, to make sure that we got it all right and didn't miss something. And number two, so they're not surprised when we present the results later to their local elected board. That's really important. So we do a resilience assessment. We also have now focus groups and interviews that are conducted ahead of time to get feedback from the most grassroots level that we can. And then we hold this second stage is what we're doing today, the Resilience Action Workshop, where the localities split out into small groups and develop a checklist of items. We call it the Resilience Action Checklist of things they want to work on for the coming year to become more resilient. And we appoint locality implementation teams. And that's why we're doing these focus groups and interviews up front as well, because that enables us to get a broader spectrum of people involved on the implementation teams. Too often we tend to think of the same names of people who are involved all the time in things. So it's great to get other feedback from a broader scope of people that can then be involved in the implementation stage, which is the 3rd stage. And that's when we stay with the localities, divide them among the 3 universities and stay with them for a year. We schedule, host, and facilitate an online monthly implementation team meeting. And we work our way through the checklist for the locality. And what we do is it depends on what the items are on the checklist, but we may bring in, if there are a lot of concerns about septic or well water, for example, we could bring in the Virginia Department of Health. If it's a lot of concerns about shoreline management, we may ask DCR's Shoreline Erosion Advisory Service to join us. So we try to bring in some state agencies that might be helpful and expertise from Virginia Institute of Marine Science and others as needed. So we try to make it a very well-rounded process for that year to get the localities through their implementation lists. All right, thank you, Libby. These are the 5 scoring categories on the scorecard: policy, leadership, and collaboration. And access to data falls under that as well. Risk assessment and emergency management. That's something that often comes to mind with resilience, right? People often tend to go there first in their mind, but we try to also take account of vulnerable populations and their access to this process. And also economic and business preparedness as part of that. Third category, infrastructure resilience. That includes stormwater, critical infrastructure, natural and nature-based features. Planning for resilience. The comprehensive plan, does it include resilience components? The zoning ordinance, building and development, all kinds of incentives and green infrastructure. And then community engagement, health and well-being. And that's an interesting category because that one incorporates issues about social equity and health and welfare that often people are saying, that's under resilience. It harkens back to what Jay Rufus said in the beginning, that we take a broad view of resilience as a big umbrella in a community. Okay, so key opportunities for improving community resilience. And these come from 2 different places: the scorecard assessment and also additional outreach through those interviews, the focus groups, and surveys to 44 individuals representing 38 NGOs, community service organizations, churches, nonprofits, and other institutions, which Sierra will cover in a moment. So a lot of outreach is incorporated into these different opportunities. So locality leadership, policy, and collaboration, that's the first scorecard category. One opportunity is to use adaptive management to update ordinances and plans based on data, scientific analyses, emerging strategies, and lessons learned. Another is to hold resiliency training, and that can be for elected officials and community leaders with experts in attendance to help out. Engaging stakeholders who will need emergency response and vulnerable populations in resiliency meetings that you can hold. And then research and consider participation in the Community Rating System Program. The National Flood Insurance Program has a CRS, Community Rating System Program, that can make your community more resilient if you take certain steps, but also can reduce flood insurance premiums. Second category is risk assessment and emergency management. And you could work with community groups to identify vulnerable groups who live or work in flood zones. Update the resident emergency plan to identify risks and needs. Task staff with engaging community leaders and community organizations about emergency preparedness, and providing programs for small business emergency preparation and business continuity after a flooding event or a big storm event. And that's really important because a lot of times small businesses don't have the time and the capacity to do a lot of this planning and preparation on their own. And so that can be helpful to have a program to assist them. Next slide. Infrastructure resilience. Increase the water supply and or stormwater infrastructure resilience, because those are important during flooding events. Enhance communication and coordination for water and wastewater stormwater resilience. Work with the Virginia Department of Transportation to identify and evaluate vulnerable transportation infrastructure, and offer fund matching or tax incentive programs for homeowners to participate in nature-based landscaping projects to increase the green infrastructure. Next. Planning for resilience, very important, so we are prepared. Ensure the comprehensive plan includes potential impacts on critical infrastructure and services, especially concerning vulnerable populations. Identify funding to meet the needs of vulnerable populations in case of emergencies. Modify flood zone designations to include areas outside of the FEMA designations that are still known to flood regularly, even if they're not a high hazard area on the FEMA maps, but they're known to recurrently flood. And then hold community meetings to educate the public about the natural resource preservation plan. And then the final scorecard category, community engagement, health, and well-being. Some opportunities here include engaging the public in resilience planning, developing resident leaders and volunteers, and acknowledging their work in supporting and advancing resilience, creating a coastal resilience committee, and assigning staff roles. And that's a great way to keep this resilience discussion going into the future after the RAFT program is over. And then partner with NGOs and community groups to identify the needs of and communicate with vulnerable populations. So with that, I am going to hand it to Sierra to continue. Thanks.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the very robust and rich list of opportunities that came out of the focus groups and interviews that our team conducted with many of you who are here today. As Elizabeth mentioned, we met with 44 individuals representing 38 different nonprofits, city government, regional institutions, faith-based community groups, and individual community leaders. We had 5 focus groups and 14 interviews last summer and had a survey we circulated. And so the opportunities and resilience, assets and challenges in a report that we'll have Maddie pop here in the chat. Hopefully you had a chance to look at this earlier. It's very rich, as I mentioned. We cover the resilience assets, resilience opportunities, challenges faced in both the cities of Petersburg and Hopewell. But today I'm going to just cover some of the opportunities, which are, if you want to skim to those, they begin on page 13 of the document. So some of the opportunities that were flagged that are specifically relevant to supporting the vulnerable or underserved in the region included leveraging city parks and green spaces to reduce urban heat effects, while also improving access to outdoor recreation opportunities, which can also impact community health and well-being, looking at improving access to healthy food options, including local fresh produce, investing in affordable housing options and thinking about development in creative ways, whether that's downtown areas or other parts of the cities, improving transportation for low-income residents, specifically to access jobs, parks for recreation and exercise and other community critical infrastructure. Supporting small local businesses, again, for sort of the job opportunity, economic development, and its relevance for residents, and then addressing infrastructure challenges, including water and sewer, which obviously impact all of the population, including the vulnerable, when they fail. So there's a lot of information. I can't touch on all of them today in 5 minutes or so, but do want to highlight some, specific creative ideas that came from participants of those focus groups and interviews. So in the context of green space, thinking about increasing and managing existing city open space for recreation, again, with the possibility of mitigating urban heat impacts, particularly during the summer, redeveloping and revitalizing urban brownfields into productive green spaces, looking at local ordinances, comprehensive plans to make urban communities more walkable, bikeable, and attractive for people to move there or stay there, developing shelters for cooling and heating, so cooling in the summer, heating in the winter, particularly for homeless residents, ideas and suggestions for partnering with local farmers and farmers of color around food access and accessibility. And there's a lot of nonprofits, partnerships, food banks, pop-up food trucks already active in the city. So thinking about how to leverage those existing initiatives, and then addressing some of the affordable housing challenges through community partnerships and strategic planning, partnering with libraries around Wi-Fi access, and considering developing more bilingual education resources and programming in Spanish around emergency management and education. So there's a lot more in there. I hope folks have had a chance to review them, hoping to leverage them in our discussions today, and incredibly grateful to all of you who contributed a lot of time and thoughtful experience from your work in the cities and in the region on resilience and equity. I think from here, I'm going to pass it to Kurt Smith, with the Middle Peninsula Planning District Commission to share some remarks and reflections on the RAFT process that is wrapping up there in the next month or so.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Like Sierra said, my name is Kurt Smith. I'm the Deputy Director of the Middle Peninsula PDC. I'm also one of the few lucky folks who've been through 2 iterations of RAFT. I worked on the Eastern Shore, where I was born and raised, in one of the earlier RAFT versions. And then when I moved over to the Middle Peninsula, here we are again. So as Sierra said, we are wrapping up our time with RAFT, and I want to highlight some of the things we've done with RAFT, and I'll preface that by saying what we've done is slightly different than all the other iterations of RAFT because of just where our region is in the resilience space. We went through a number of years. We've gone through a lot of different planning initiatives, a lot of different studies. There was a lot of work identifying what the threats are with regards to resilience, and through direction of our commissioners, they said we've had enough of that. We're ready to start doing something about these problems and doing it in a programmatic way. So that's where we started with RAFT. Was we had these programmatic solutions in place, which I'll introduce very briefly in a little while, but we used RAFT to kind of plug into those existing programs and help kind of expedite the progress and success we've had with this programmatic approach of doing in the resilient space. So I'll say in the down at the community level, where we've had all the communities in our region having these separate discussions and developing specific strategies. A lot of that work has been in the space of what Sierra talked about earlier, in terms of initiating some discussions on very specific topics. We did have some communities that really did a good job of kind of segregating what are government specific options and actions that can take place during RAFT. Those are going to be things that are flagged in your scorecards. Those are going to be opportunities for improvements along how can our ordinances be rewritten, which planning work is still necessary and needed. So those items are underway at the community level, and then there's separate non-government actions related to things that don't involve government. So that was a newer way that was implemented here on the Middle Peninsula that we didn't necessarily do on the Eastern Shore. But at the regional level, like I said, what we've done is kind of try to plug in and prop up and support our regional, drive more people into our regional programs. So we've done things like we've worked with the RAFT team to sponsor a regional workshop that was focused on education and outreach, where all the RAFT participants from all the communities came in. We had VIM's staff come in and present some of the newer mapping resources related to vulnerable residential septic systems, vulnerable drinking wells, things like that, to just inform and educate on the existing tools and resources that were available there. We've leveraged several grants through the RAFT DuPont Foundation Grant Fund. We had we successfully got $25,000 for septic repairs for citizens of low to moderate income. So that was a great outcome. We've had another 50,000 or so that's come in to help support ongoing RAFT workshops that'll help kind of keep the momentum going once the focus shifts to Crater, and as well develop some videos for our programmatic website and our program's called the Middle Peninsula Fight the Flood program. I'll show that in a second. And aside from that, there's been numerous outreach events, just educating folks around what Fight the Flood is and how citizens can utilize it. So I think I'll spend my remaining time kind of showing what a programmatic solution could look like for the Crater region or really anywhere. What we've built is the first of its kind in the Commonwealth. It's a municipally offered free resource for the constituents of the Middle Peninsula that, number one, serves to educate and provide information regarding flood risk. Number two, it helps connect citizens and businesses with qualified contractors to advance project to address identified needs. And number three, it serves as a financial tool to actually finance and see those projects through. So we have created and baked in tools into this website that I'm going to show you. And the impetus, the background as to why this was necessary was just that, you know, I've worked in this space a long time, and now there's a lot of maps out there showing the risks and a lot of information available, but the traditional way of how we're moving the needle on actually implementing a lot of projects and implementing a lot of actions just wasn't really cutting it. So we said something has to be done differently in a programmatic fashion that emphasizes and prioritizes addressing the highest priority needs where they actually are. And in our region, just like in much of the Commonwealth, that's on private property. Traditionally, the grants that have been available, the funding resources that have been available really have been focused on publicly owned property. So the traditional model was, let's work really hard. Maybe we'll get a grant and we'll get one project done over here. The governor will come out, we'll cut a ribbon and pat each other on the back, and let's hope we do it again in 2 years. We said something's got to change. And so we've built this tool and we're having a lot of success. So I'll share my screen so you can see the actual website. It's fightthefloodva.com. And I'll start off. Can everybody see that first off? It looks like you can from my perspective, but I'll start off by saying this is a portable, we built this in a portable way so that any other locality in the nation can build this same tool to suit your specific needs, whether it be for a locality or a region. And so the way this works is there's really two doors to come in. You can come in through a property owner and submit your needs, and we'll connect you with the resources to make that project or that solution a reality. And then there's a door for qualified businesses to come through. And so on the business side, what we've done, which was a really low-hanging fruit and a big need for us, was we have organized a very disorganized resilient space. It was hard to find qualified contractors. So we have created an industry cluster here in the Middle Peninsula with several dozen businesses that we vet, and anybody can log on and get this information anytime. So at its simplest form, now you know who to call. And these are not, Joe Smith who went and got a backhoe from Home Depot. These are folks that are Class A contractors, and they provide all kinds of various services. So on the property owner side, the way it works for them is most folks will come in and peruse the educational information that's on there. But then most people log on because they need help. And so they submit a form to us. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. They offer up some general information, and we get feedback from them as to what's your problem and where are you on your journey to solving that problem. And specifically, we have the ability to connect them with the tools that they're going to need, the resources they're going to need to fix those problems where they are on that journey. So the way this is shaped is that we ask questions around needs in very specific geographic areas. So you can click that you have a shoreline problem. It'll bring up a series of shoreline questions, and we have ways to connect them to our available resources. We have the Commonwealth's only Living Shoreline Loan Fund. We have a $3 million line of credit to advance living shoreline projects, which are not easily financeable through private banks. So a huge resource for our citizens on the Middle Peninsula. We have on questions around stormwater or inland flooding problems, and we have we don't have any loan funds for them yet. We hope to have some fund for stormwater BMPs on that side in the near future. But we have the ability to find grants in that space and grants in the shoreline space as well. We have questions around infrastructure. Does your home need elevating? Does it need retrofitting? So on and so forth. We have means to get funds to folks for that, and as well as navigability and dredging needs. So that's a big issue here in our region. We're actually on the verge of launching a municipal dredging program to help those folks and connect them with qualified dredging contractors through Fight the Flood as well. So that's the way it works, is they tell us their information through this form. And on the back end, let's see if I can, having trouble seeing my, here's what it looks like on the GIS side on the back end. So every form here, every dot here is a story that somebody has told us. And we have the ability to know what their problem is. Do they need funding? They have permit in hand. They have no idea what to do. They just know they got a problem. All those stories are wrapped into these dots. And so at any given time, as a grant opportunity comes online, we have the ability to screen these dots to align our, I always say our priorities, our resilience priorities are the grant funders' priorities. And we have the ability to find the projects that the grant funders want to find that are in the resilience space. And here's an example. I'll show you. I'll just pick on, let's see, one dot here. You can see this is all the information that was filled in that form shows up here, and we have the ability to screen it and identify projects. And on the grant side, this is the way this works. So when I turn on this layer here, this was a grant we got through DEQ that was some Hurricane Florence disaster funds that wanted to see more living shorelines in the Chesapeake Bay region, and it needed to be in an approved implementation plan area, watershed implementation plan area. So we applied for it, got this grant. DEQ said that, you know, we need living shorelines inside this polygon, and we had the ability to go in, and everybody who had clicked or submitted a form in this area said they had an erosion problem and they wanted a living shoreline. In short, they won the grant lottery. We were working with 5 of the Fight the Flood citizens right here on these projects, wrapping that up now. The program has been a huge success, and we launched this in 2020, and to date we've brought in over $24 million for our little rural region in this space. So this could be a possible alternative for some localities to start to think about in the RAFT process. Is are we ready to take that step? Is there political will to take that step to get more into the doing space? And I personally am very biased, honestly, because we already did this, but there's an unprecedented amount of money to help with your community's resilience needs, and a programmatic structure is the answer. So it's something to consider. RAFT can help with that. I'll end there. Happy to take any questions.
Kurt, this is Kristen Owen with Enrico. How do you all vet the businesses that you allow to sign up through your website?
We we have a program design that oversees how the entire program operates, and in there kind of where our vetting requirements are, if you will. So we do require a specific contractor license to make sure they're valid on that end of things. We want to make sure that they have licensure to work in our communities, obviously. And we wanted to make sure that they had experience. We asked for experience, qualifications, things like that. Provide examples of projects. We've turned down a number of companies that are more on the startup level. We've told them that we think that they're future fight the flood businesses, but they just weren't quite ready. So
I have two questions. Reggie Tabor from the city of Petersburg. One is the source of the $24 million grant funds and from the state, or does it include contributions from local governments and or private residential property owners?
those are, that includes the $3 million line of credit, which so that's the loan side, and the remainder would be grant. And I didn't mention, but our line of credit goes for living shorelines as well as septic repair. We've been in the residential on-site septic repair loan space for 25 years now, but we've been able to accelerate that with the additional funding we've gotten.
And the grants came from the state?
They have come from numerous sources. We built inside of this, we have built a grant writing machine that is operating at a level I've never seen happen before. Last year alone, we submitted over, well, I'll say right around 100 grant applications using this tool. And it's, we're using it to use the information that's coming in to almost not only just identify the grant, but streamline the grant writing process. And the important thing here too, on the grant side of things, is how do you finance grant funded projects when the vast majority of grants are reimbursable grants? The government doesn't stroke you a check and you get to go spend it. You have to spend the money first and hand the government the receipt in order to access the grant funds. And so when we're for instance, why this is so important is when you're working with your most socioeconomically vulnerable persons in your community, fronting that money on, say, like a living shoreline can cost $100,000 to $250,000. You're talking $600 a linear foot. We have citizens we're trying to help find money to just design a project, let alone construct a project. That's a very expensive solution space there. So our loan funds allow us to front the money to be able to access the grants. They work in our line of credit works in tandem with the grants. It's a critical instrument for getting grant money to flow to private citizens.
Great. And your website, is that a proprietary?
Oh no, it's open to anybody. I'll put the link in the chat.
But as far as development of the website, how was that created?
We leverage grants to develop it. As I said, it can be portable to any other community. We work through a marketing company located here in Gloucester, Coastal Consociate, and we have materials we can share with all the communities who want to explore that route of launching your own website. We're working with a number of localities really up and down the Atlantic seaboard right now, and one on the western seaboard that is more recent, that are exploring a fight the flood for their community.
Thank you so much, Kurt. So getting back into RAFT, we can have the next slide, please. I want to talk about the resilience action checklists, because seeing a tool like Fight the Flood is really, really great, but you've got to start off with step one. Resilience is a marathon, not a sprint. So we've got to run the first mile, and that would be thinking about some of your resilience action checklists. So the goal at the end of this workshop today is to come up with 3 to 5 top priority actions that your locality can do over the next year. And I think the operative word here is that is within your power to do. So keeping in mind that resilience is not just flood resilience, it's not just heat resilience, it's not just disaster resilience. It's also the social and economic and educational and health resilience of your community. whole community resilience. What are some of those actions that you can do within the next year? I think we've all realized if you need to completely redesign your city's stormwater system, that's not going to happen within the next year. But you can come up with the steps that you need to be able to get the team together and get the grant writing in place and get a grant written. And perhaps if you have some small amount of funding, write an RFP to be able to get something designed. That's thinking about the steps that you can take in a year. So even if it is something, you know that it's a big long-term need, but you know that it's a high priority need, how can you get that little piece done within the next year? As Kurt has offered, there are ways where you can consider leveraging the tools and resources that have been developed in other places, whether you're talking about Fight the Flood, or you're talking about programs in other places that have been developed to improve affordable housing, or to improve the provision of locally grown healthy food. There are a lot of models that you can research over the next year and try to understand what can be done in your community. Maybe you have to take a piece of this from here and take a piece of this from here and put it together to get it to work for Hopewell or for Petersburg. Those are pieces that you can do within the next year. And you also want to make sure that you're looking really specifically at your needs in your locality. You are looking for that long-term impact, even if it can't be done within the next year. It's something that you can make progress on for that long-term big impact. The second piece of this is you want to look for things that have not already been done. If you know that something is a big high priority need in your community, but someone already has a grant to develop a resilience hub or a shelter, or someone already has a grant or has been making progress on broadband access, that might not be the best way to direct your time over the next year. Maybe it is to become an action where you make a connection with that entity who's doing that project and figure out what other resources do they need to gap fill. Or your group may decide together that you want to say, they have that in hand, we're going to put our efforts somewhere else so that we're covering the whole of the need for resilience. Again, doesn't have to be done within the next year, but if you can make substantial progress toward that year one of a 2, 3, 5 year project, that can be something that we're looking for. It would really be great if these are priorities that you are willing to work on at the table. But if you're not the right person, then one of the things that your group needs to discuss is how to bring in ways to bring the right people to the table and make sure that your group is supporting it. And you also want to look for opportunities for resilience that increase the resilience for everyone in a community. Communities are only as resilient as the least resilient among us. And so making sure that our resilience efforts are just, equitable, and sustainable is extremely important. So some examples of some of these effective actions that have come out of past rounds, particularly on the Eastern Shore and the Northern Neck of resilience actions. These can be really, really simple steps. Making connections in a community to try to broaden your efforts and how you're engaging those vulnerable populations. It can be actions toward planning. The RAFT also has tools and the ability, our team has the ability to support you in these actions as well. So don't worry if your team doesn't have a whole bunch of engineers to get a huge engineering project done over the next year. There are things that you can do. So some examples of the idea of making connections that then resulted in a project. In Anancock and Accomack County, they identified a need to replace some, repair and replace some marina, obviously someplace on the Eastern Shore. Water access, very, very important, not just culturally, but commercially. So that team over the year was able to connect to a fellow with an engineering firm funded by Virginia Sea Grant, who was able to help them get a project design so that at the end of that year, they had that design ready to be able to go out for a grant application. Some of the Eastern Shore towns were able to make some initial connections to VDOT about some of the places where their roads were flooding, and they were able to identify the connections that they needed to be able to prioritize which of those roads needed to be repaired first. Can't fix everything at once. How do you decide what gets fixed first? They were able to make those connections and get that knowledge into the community. For planning, Accomack and Colonial Beach have both looked at comprehensive planning explicitly to incorporate resilience. If you take a look at the RAFT webinar that is included in our list of links in your agenda, this is one place that has a great spot in that RAFT resilience research and policy products section to get you started on how you weave resilience into a comprehensive plan, so that that comprehensive plan that then becomes a guide over the next 5 years, 10 years in the community is continuing to push resilience across all aspects of your community. And green infrastructure and inventories and tree canopy plans. That's something else that multiple localities have taken on. In the Eastern Shore and the Northern Neck, the UVA Green Infrastructure Center was able to have some of their classes take on some of the needs for conserving green infrastructure that already exists in Colonial Beach. So sometimes it's not just about building something new, it's about identifying the assets that you have and protecting them for the future. Emergency management and planning and working with vulnerable populations is also something that has come up as a really common resilience action identified in these groups before. In Whitestone, they work to provide emergency radios for folks within the community. There are several communities that have looked at doing emergency risk communication plans. The RAFT website includes a 7-step process to help you do that. And then there's also plans and guidance to help you assess community vulnerability, do mapping, and identify your data needs within your community. You can actually organize and conduct exercises within the next year using some of these tools to understand how hazards are affecting vulnerable populations. We don't have any more questions. I can turn it over to Sierra, who's going to go a little bit more deeply into our process for today for developing our checklist. So one last chance. Questions? Everyone's ready to go?
Thanks,
Awesome.
Jess.
I love it. All right, take it away, Sierra.
Thanks, Jess. And Jay, we can also in the breakout groups too direct you to any of those specific tools on the RAFT resources page of the website. So I'm going to cover now in a couple minutes here the nitty gritty of what we're going to do in the breakout groups, kind of transitioning from Jess's larger overview of what to consider on the resilience action checklist to how we're going to do that today in our breakout groups. So for Hopewell and Petersburg specifically, you'll enter your breakout group. We'll name them so you can click on that and get in there, and we'll have a team in this main room to help you if you have any issues. In that discussion room, you'll have a Google Doc worksheet and facilitators to help you. And each group will have a little over an hour, about 1 hour and 15 minutes to really hold some space for discussion, review opportunities, and work on identifying 5 items that will increase resilience. And so we'll be sharing the links to those Google Docs and help getting folks oriented over there in those breakout sessions. So as you work on identifying 5 items, we would like folks to consider at least one action that specifically increases resilience for vulnerable or underserved populations in the community to increase equity. And then the other 4 can be really open choice, any priority action that is on any resilience topic, covering scorecard opportunities, opportunities identified from the interviews and focus groups, or other ideas that come out of the discussion today. I do want to note that the goal is obviously to align with and support existing and current planning efforts underway. So we'll be leaning into the localities too to share any updates on comprehensive planning or resilience planning efforts that have been initiated or advanced since we did the scoring itself. And then want to also remind folks that these priorities aren't locked in stone. Over the year of implementation, these can shift, evolve. They're often refined in the first couple months of implementation team meetings as additional folks are pulled in. So we'll keep an open mind and give them space to evolve, but are excited today to really build the scaffolding for what those 5 items should be. So again, there'll be 3 breakout groups, Hopewell, Petersburg, and Plan RVA. Only the Plan RVA folks should enter that 3rd group because the process will look a little bit different to go through the prep tool. If you are an institution that serves both Hopewell and Petersburg, or you work regionally, then you get to pick which group you go into or hop between them. So if you're with a state agency or a nonprofit that's in both, you can move between the 2 rooms. So we'll have some folks that are rooted in one locality, while some of these regional partners will kind of move around and cross-pollinate, and both of those roles are really important. You can also leave your breakout group and hop back to the main room at any time if you need help getting moved into another one. Jess Krause or some representative from our team will be there to help move you to a different room. Each of the groups will have a different Google Doc, and we'll make sure those are shared out when we break. And then once we get over there into the breakout groups, and we'll get those posted so you can take a look. But we'll have facilitators, like I mentioned, that are leading you through the process. You'll have approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes, and then we'll come back to the large group at 3:15. Where we'll be kind of sharing some of the key actions and next steps. So all, Hopewell and Petersburg can look at what the other localities are working on and wrap by 4. So if you're in the Plan RVA group, you'll be joining that 3rd group where you'll have a similar process of facilitators there to introduce you to the RAFT prep tool, contextualize it, talk about its applicability to your localities. Those groups will be slightly shorter, so 45 minutes. And then after that, you all are free to be excused from the rest of the workshop unless you want to hang out or come back to hear the debrief from Hopewell and Petersburg groups. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions about the process, what we're going to be doing in the breakout groups, before we open them and let folks get settled in either the Petersburg, Hopewell, or Plan RVA breakouts. And it looks like, thanks, Jess, for answering the question we had in the chat here about if folks can move back and forth. Yes, we welcome that. And the Google Docs will be filling notes and live. So if you need to catch up, if you join a group and didn't get to hear earlier conversation, we'll have it documented in those Google Docs so you can catch up and participate. So welcome folks to move around. Any other questions? Okay.
Great. Well, if not, I'm going to open the rooms now, and you all should be able to move.
So this is an opportunity for you all to ask questions of each other. I'm going to start out, and just because I was in the Hopewell group, for those of you who were in the Hopewell group, what are your thoughts as you've learned what Petersburg came up with? Are there any surprises that you had?
Yeah. Let me clarify, are you asking the Hopewell group to comment on the Petersburg's tasks?
Yeah, and Petersburg is going to have a chance to comment on Hopewell here in a second too.
Okay, just making sure.
Could you put them up again? Could I hear those or read those again? Or can?
Yeah, they're in the chat. I don't know if Libby can cut and paste those into the PowerPoint quickly. So Petersburg, I'll go back and read since I now have them blown up on my screen because I need them large to read them. Number 1, diversify the economic base for the community. Number 2, develop landscape standards and requirements to mitigate water quality, air quality, and heat impacts of development projects, especially greenfields. Number 3 is connectivity, connecting people to goods and service and critical infrastructure through transit and broadband. Number 4 is to be intentional about incorporating all residents of the city in resilience planning efforts. And number 5 is capital improvements for Petersburg City schools, or public schools, public safety facilities, and all public infrastructure. And then Hopewells were addressing food desert issues for underserved populations, a homeless shelter for all, and an affordable housing study for the region to highlight those most vulnerable populations. Number 3 is utilizing school building and physical landscapes as exemplars for stormwater management and green practices. Number 4 is to expand outreach efforts of various services and resources located and accessible to the citizens that are underserved, especially non-English speakers, LGBTQ, and African-American families, with community training sessions on how to become more resilient. And then number 5, redevelop the marina to be accessible by all and a waterfront destination. And then number 6, since I know some people were having trouble voting and we were squeaking it at the last second, so it was super, super close, ensure the comp plan that includes community input on coastal resilience. So 2 really robust, but also very, very different sets. Does anybody have thoughts? We'll just open it up to anybody with thoughts here.
Yeah, I have thoughts. This is Thaddeus at Crater PDC. It seems as if the Petersburg group did a job of, kind of put those into what I would call strategies, for resilience, in that you could have 3 or 4 objectives or initiatives or things come out of those strategies. Whereas the Hopewell group seems to be a little more specific, like went right to the objectives. Like the marina thing, that is pretty specific. And the food desert could be part of, more part of a healthy living type situation, part of resiliency. Now, I'm not advocating for either way, and that's, better, but it seems as if looking at the Petersburg group, it seems like that's, where they've gone. And it's a little broader, so, in the future, it seems like you might be able to build around that a little better. Anyway.
Yeah, that is a great observation. I was noticing that a little bit too. Sarah.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that too. I think if we kind of combine the strategies, I think we'd come up with a really focused list for both places, with some very specific goals, like Hopewell has, and then, getting them into groups that maybe certain people could work on and things like that. So I think it's been a really useful process.
Thank you.
Other
comments?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think we were very focused here at Hopewell in our group, particularly around things that have been known to be issues for a while, and we're ready to take action. And I think that's probably why you see so specific. That's why we say Hopewell means business, because we're ready to take action. We don't need to be talking real broadly about stuff anymore. We just need to get stuff done.
This is Jay Rufo from the Crater PDC. I was in the Petersburg group, so I didn't get to sit in on the Hopewell group. But from what y'all said, I think that's going to be helpful as far as planning, because you could say, hey, how do we get the marina, for example, that stuck out in my head. How do we get that done, right? That's a task. I also think too, you could involve a little bit of some of the task number 6 into the marina or into the education piece. So for example, if we're trying to draw the Marina District for All as an entertainment spot, a recreation spot, a public access spot, how do we educate the people visiting our city to protect that waterway? Because what's unique about Hopewell it is at the confluence of the Appomattox and the James. So there's a huge piece there about how what happens there can affect everything else around or downstream or so. So I applaud you all for having a specific objective, but B, I think you could incorporate some of the other pieces of resilience into your specific objectives. Going back to the food desert piece, I think if you can identify your food deserts and then work around how you're going to connect the food deserts to the people that need access,
Yeah.
therein lies a solution. And you're kind of working on two resilient pieces at once. So that was just kind of my observation coming from the other side.
That's a really good one. Are there other commonalities between the two? One of the ones that jumped out to me was that connectivity piece that's needed, especially to underlie the food desert issue, as well as the outreach issue and the connectivity elements that came out in Petersburg. Are there other commonalities that others have noticed?
What are they saying with connectivity?
Connectivity, yeah. Oh, like connections.
We're muted, right?
No.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say from the Petersburg group, we talked about connectivity at a couple different levels. So there was a recommendation for thinking about pedestrian and bikeability planning within the city of Petersburg, but then folks also acknowledged that there's a need for kind of linkages and strategic transportation planning to connect people to jobs outside of the city. So we do have, some specific actions, and there'll obviously be more wordsmithing that would be sub bullets, but I do think there was interest in linkages regionally around transit and connectivity. So that could be, a regional item, or if there are connections between the two cities or other parts of the region that, could be addressed at the regional level as well.
Good one. My next question, I want to start asking about resources, but here, because these processes have been a little bit different, I wanted to create a space for the Plan RVA group to give a little bit of a readout.
I think that's me, because I think we has left. Sorry.
Okay.
We had a good discussion. And Henrico said that they have a resilience plan that was approved by DCR for purposes of the Community Flood Preparedness Fund dollars, but that could perhaps be beefed up a little or helped by going through the prep tool process. And so Yusuf is going to provide support for Henrico. They have an environmental committee there that she could talk to them to help address questions that might come up through that. And we're looking at perhaps end of May for them to have worked through that. And by the way, we went through there's a quick start guide to resilience, which anyone can access on both the VCPC website and on the RAFT website. That's a handy tool to help with that. And it's handy as you go through the regular RAFT process as well, if anyone wants to take a look at that. For Charles City County, we're hoping to get to work through it by maybe end of April. And I'll be working with them on that. So we're very excited to get the prep tool started off the ground. And the Plan RVA PDC folks will be assisting as well.
Great. So that brings us to a discussion really quickly of some of the resources. What are some of the joint opportunities that we have here, and where you can say, this is a resource that we need you as the RAFT team to bring to us so that we can be successful in accomplishing this? And this can be for any of the groups. As you're going through and you're taking a look at those actions or what your work is ahead of you, what kind of resources can we bring to the table for you as the universities to help you along?
Excuse me.
Possibly sort of navigating some of the systems in order to get change to happen.
Mhm.
You know, if I'm a professor, so I don't understand how city government works. Somebody in city government might not have the background in some other field. And so sort of helping us to speak to each other and understand each other, I think is going to be really important.
Perhaps case studies and or ordinance language, ordinances that have been adopted in other communities to implement some of the priorities that we've identified.
It's a good one.
I was gonna say almost piggyback on the gentleman that just spoke, but also models of programs that have worked, right? So instead of reinventing the wheel, seeing what is out there and what has worked for communities that are similar to the communities that we are looking to.
That's a really good one.
I'll just say this came up in the Petersburg group was classes and faculty. We had members of VSU present, but also planning students from UVA. So just thinking about how the university partners can leverage faculty and student classes to help with some of the work on checklist items.
Along those lines too, I think examples of regional efforts and not just jurisdiction specific efforts may help. I know that food desert issues, homeless and unsheltered issues, because those are issues that not only face one jurisdiction, but multiple jurisdictions within our region.
Okay. Those are all great things that we can bring to the table.
I would like time to think about how the RAFT and UVA can support what we're doing in Hopewell. I think some of that assistance with facilitation, assistance with, finding funds to support the work that we're doing, but also just coordinating the efforts. So a lot of work has already been done, for example, around food access. A study was done by VCU that was an extensive study that showed us where in the city of Hopewell food access is limited. So we did deem from that study that there's a food access issue. It's not necessarily a food desert, but definitely food security is an issue. And we've come up with some plans or concepts of how to address that. So maybe getting support to implement those ideas, because there's been a lot of conversation and discussion, but to not actually put the ideas into implementation and bringing all the players together, because this is a goal for one Hopewell at least. There's a lot of stuff happening in silos and a lot of people talking to different people, but it's all not happening in the same room. And I don't know if that's because people are naturally competitive around funding and accessing funding. So it's like, well, I'm gonna do this over here in my corner because I'm going for this money. And then once I get the funding, I'll come and talk to you, versus us all kind of being on the same page at the same time. So maybe providing support from the RAFT in coordinating those efforts and eliminating the silos so that it can be one strong coordinated effort with a strong foundation.
That's a great comment and a great role. Thank you. Yeah. And Sarah, maybe also says in the chat, maybe some help to develop specific targets. How much tree cover, for example.
Yeah, so if we put a number or a target, then we can see our progress. I think sometimes, we feel like these are really big problems and it just drops in the bucket. But if we can somehow say we move 2% closer or 10% closer to our target, then I think that it helps us see where we want to go. But it also lets us see that we're moving in the right direction and gives us a little bit of encouragement.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Anything else? Otherwise, I think it sounds like we're naturally on to where do we go from here? What's the next step? So I'm going to turn it over to Nicole from ODU.
Great, thank you.
Share that with us.
And yeah, if we could go to the next slide. Perfect. Thank you so much. So our next step, now that we have some resilience action checklist items, is to form implementation teams. And one of the things that you did in your groups is you started to identify who might be potential team leads or who might serve on these implementation teams. Like I said to Hopewell, none of you have been voluntold to do this. So these aren't commitments yet. You will get to commit yourself if you do choose to be on these teams. But what the team leads are going to do is they're going to be one or two people that are sort of in charge of progressing each of the resilience action checklists items. And then there will be a broader implementation team that can involve community members, but we encourage broad participation from members of government and others as appropriate. That implementation team will have monthly calls that are convened as needed and focus on progressing the resilience action checklist items. These will be facilitated by the RAFT core team and are great opportunities for networking as well as progressing those items. We're going to have more Google Drive documents for you to where we can track between meetings. We realize you can't be at every single meeting, and so you will have a way to go back and see what has been done in between should you be unable to attend any of those. And as you find more ways for us as the RAFT core team and our various university resources to support you, then we'll be able to come up with various products that are able to complement your efforts and help you progress those forwards. Does anybody have questions about the implementation team? And you'll obviously be able to ask them as they get formed, but if you have any upfront, please ask now. All right. I will say we had some great listings of potential implementation team members in our Hopewell group. I'm sure that Petersburg did as well. If you think of questions afterwards, you're always welcome to follow up with us. We've been emailing you about this meeting, so you know how to contact us. And I will turn it over to Elizabeth Andrews to talk about some of our next steps and evaluation from here.
Terrific. Thank you, Nicole. So we have a timeline for you, tentative one, end of February / early March, so very soon. The draft resilience action checklist will be distributed to you. I know that was hard to see them all in the chat as we're trying to proactively put them up there right after they're developed. So we're going to be sending them out to you. And then in March / April, we will begin the implementation team meetings. We are still seeking funding to support these efforts. We want to say thank you, by the way, to our funders who are always wonderful about funding us all the time, which is the Virginia Environmental Endowment and the Virginia Sea Grant Program and the Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program of NOAA. But we are still seeking some funding to assist us with the implementation stage. And we also, of course, want to thank the Creative Planning District Commission for their partnership, as well as Plan RVA for their partnership in working with us on the PrEP tool.
Comes in. Historically, this has been a partnership between ODU, William and Mary, and University of Virginia. as we do move forward into implementation, we're really, really excited to welcome both VSU and Virginia Tech to the teams who will be coming in and taking a look at some of these elements and working with us to figure out how best to get you some of those resources and match the capabilities of each of those institutions along with our institutions to be able to help you accomplish your goals over the next year. So I just wanted to give one more shout out to VSU and Virginia Tech for coming in and joining the RAFT party.
Right, absolutely. And there was a question just now in the chat box about, will this be sent to everyone? So the recording is going to be preserved from the main session, right? And will that be not sent to everyone, but I think put on our, is that on our YouTube channel that we're going to put it?
Yep, I think we usually put it there. So we'll have to, it's 2 recordings because we stopped in between, but we'll splice it. And I think we is the master of the YouTube channel. So we'll work with her to get that posted. Great. Well, everyone, in addition to that, right before we go, we would love if you would all turn your cameras on so we can take a little picture, because we want to just be really cognizant of all the wonderful people who were able to join us today. Thank you so much, everybody.